Today we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. My idea for this show was to invite guests and get the conversation started, to take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. And we encourage our listeners to look within themselves to take decisive action to make a positive difference.
Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers, and I'm very excited today to have with me my special guest, Mr. Richard Probst. I normally would go into reading the bio and go on into that, but it is really the bio itself is telling the story of this amazing man who resides here in Indianapolis, Indiana, in my hometown, and we very recently were connected, and all I can say is that it is a blessing and it is long overdue. For many years, I've had friends, various friends, say to me that I should get to know Richard Probst. Do you know Richard Probst? And I was like, I do not, but the name keeps coming up, so I feel like I do, but I really don't. And so a couple of weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, I finally was encouraged for the last time to reach out to Richard. We've been connected on Facebook and have so many commonalities, and it is strange that we never really connected. So I wanted to put that mystery to an end, and I reached out to him, and we were speaking, and all of a sudden he said something, and I said, "Stop! That's a show. Stop! I don't want to go any further. Stop! That's it. Freeze frame." And so the statement in which I froze in time was I owe my life to black people, and I was fascinated by that comment. Richard Probst is a white male for our listeners, and I was struck by that. I was struck by that because there are many things about a statement such as that speak to, in a profound way, our humanity, our care and concern for one another. It hit and resonated so deeply, and I thought, as we are covering the topic of racism, I thought this is another angle to take a look at that. It's not always the result, the black-white connection. It's not always at odds. It's not always, and it provided me an angle to look at our higher angels, and I thought this is great, and so I would like to welcome right now my guest and my friend, Mr. Richard Probst. Welcome, Richard.
Hey, thank you very, very much. I'm not sure I can live up to that introduction, but I'm very, very excited and honored to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. And so here we are. And I would just like to start, if you would sort of set up and give us the story of your sort of humble beginnings, because you have challenges that you faced straight away. And I think that I would just like to start there. Let's start at the beginning.
All right. Well, I was born in 1965, October 1st, 1965, and I was born in Witham Hospital, which is a small hospital in Lebanon, Indiana, and I was born with spina bifida. And in 1965, probably about 95% of the people who were born with spina bifida did not survive it for very long. And those who did tended to have pretty profound disabilities. And so I kind of had that disadvantage very early on of not only, being born with this birth defect, but then being born in a rural Indiana hospital. And this is a birth defect where the spine is open at birth. And so, your entire survival depends on them being able to close that spine. This hospital was not equipped to do that. And so I had to be transferred to a hospital that could. And so there were just immense odds against my survival. My parents were told that I would survive 3 days.
Wow.
And most of my childhood was that, those kinds of limitations being put out there for me and with my parents. So,
and a continuous sort of grim outlook. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
I mean,
once I survived those 3 days, then it became maybe a few months, maybe a year. He'll certainly never go to school. He's going to have, profound intellectual disabilities. He'll always be dependent. Then it was I'd never survive to 10. I'd never get through school. Just continuously saying that I wasn't going to survive. I was going to have all of these significant disabilities, and I do have a lot of physical challenges. But
sure.
They were profoundly wrong a lot. So that's what I would say.
I would say, yeah, absolutely. And as I look at your bio, I know that they were way wrong. You are an overachiever, and a person who I admire. As I look at this bio, I'm going, wow. To know that, first of all, an individual could achieve these things, this kind of trajectory and touch into so many different areas with excellence. And to be able to do that, an able-bodied person, you know what I mean, with all the parts working well from the beginning, it is remarkable. It is even more remarkable when I think about the challenges that you face. And as we were speaking, and you sort of mentioned to me, the grim outlook and how people just didn't, the expectation being that low. And literally, when I say the word deadline, I mean it really. I mean, literally, you were given a deadline, 3 days, 5 days, he won't last till 10, he won't, and it's like these literally are, are deadlines, as in the real meaning, that are constantly put up. And I'm just saying, you just overcame all that and just said, you know what, I don't believe any of that, and you moved on. And you were sharing with me a story, because I want to sort of focus back in to this narrative of I owe my life to Black people. I want to start there and sort of, you take it from there and tell us about those folk that encouraged and supported in the early days when there were other folk who were just, did not have quite the same.
They were not doing that.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to let you have that, because you're a great storyteller and far better than I when it's your story. So have at it.
All right. Well, as I was kind of noting, I had to be transferred to a hospital here in Indianapolis, and they tried to get me into Riley, which would have been the logical choice, but Riley was full, and so they couldn't get me into Riley. So I ended up going into what was then known as Marion County General Hospital, is now Eskenazi. And, at the time, it's the county hospital. It's an urban hospital. It's where you go when you don't have, a lot of funding. So that's where I was transferred. And I was transferred well past, when I was born. I arrived there when I was about 1 day old, and placed on, back then they still had all the children's wards and all of that. And so, they rushed me there. They got me there. They did the surgery. And, kind of the miracle of all that, because obviously I was 1 or 2 days old. I don't remember that. But I had this really powerful experience, and I have always felt a strong as you and I have discussed, I owe my life to black people. I have always felt a strong connection to the black community, especially here in Indianapolis, where I've lived my entire life. And probably 2 or 3 years ago, I was in the parking lot of a Walgreens close to my home on the east side, and this elderly black woman looks at me very carefully as I'm lifting my wheelchair into my car, and she looks at me, and she's eyeballing me, and she's eyeballing me, and then she looks at me, and she finally says, "Ricky," which is what I was known as from birth until probably my teenage years. I said yes, and I figured it was somebody from my past. She comes up to me and she's like, "I was your nurse. I was your nurse when you were a child." And she looks at me again and she says, "Ricky Propes." So she remembered me. She remembered my last name, and she's like, "I was there the day you were born." And she's like, "I was there when you came in through the emergency room. You were 1 day old. We loved you. We just loved you. We knew you were going to make it." And I mean, as I'm getting right now, I got nothing but chills. I mean, because you could feel in her voice the passion for that. And I've actually run into her since this experience again. And she remembers it. She remembers it so fondly. She remembered my name. And it's interesting for me because some of my best childhood memories, even though, I've had 50 plus surgeries in my life, I consider those days in the hospital to be just treasured memories because I was loved to life back then. These people took a child who should not have survived, and they loved me. And the thing is, so many of those nurses and so many of those aides, they were black, and they were the most nurturing kind, and yet they also instilled in me that discipline that has kept me going. I'm turning 55 next week. Nobody would have. I haven't planned for retirement. I wasn't supposed to survive. So, but they instilled that in me, and they just gave me so much, and that's how it's been my entire life. But it started literally on day one.
Wow, that is incredible. Again, it's compassion, it's encouragement, the discipline that you mentioned, and the love. That's why I said stop. Stop. There's a story that is, and it's not a story. It is your life, and that's why you're here. And I am honored to have you here, and I celebrate every moment of that. Again, and you don't need me to tell you any of this because, again, as I look at your bio, you have not lost a step at all, and it is very, very impressive. And like I said, it is an honor to have you here. And I do want to dive into some of these specifics here in a bit. And but we are sort of hovering very close to a break, so I want to make sure that we can get in and out of that. Again, it's an honor to have you here. And so you said October the 1st, so we're coming up on October the 1st. So let me be the first to wish you happy birthday. Happy birthday,
Thank you.
Richard Propes. Absolutely. So I think that's a wonderful occasion, and we celebrate you being here, and and I wish you many, many, many more. So you are a blessing, sir. So at this point, you are so welcome. We are going to take a break. You are listening to Bill Myers Inspires right here on the Inspired Choices Network with my special guest today, Mr. Richard Propes. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talents, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, BillMyersInspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation.
We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and my guest today is Mr. Richard Probst. I do want to take just a moment in this particular segment. Our show today is entitled, I Owe My Life to Black People, and this was a statement that Richard had shared with me in conversation, and I said, that's a show, and I'll see you there. Okay, so now this is very interesting because I did not go through his bio, but I'm just sort of going to visit it throughout the show. While Richard's childhood story is dramatic, from his birth and unexpected survival with spina bifida to his early experiences with childhood sexual abuse, even more dramatic is the story of Richard's survival and the creation of a life far beyond anyone's expectations, including his own. Now in his early 50s and still far surpassing medical expectations, Richard continues to be an award-winning activist and writer who has been nominated 2 years in a row for Indy's Best Human in the Indy Star's annual Community Choice Awards. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about, folks. That's why I'm sort of trying to find those words, because literally we're talking to a man who's been nominated twice for Best Human. I have never had a conversation with an individual who has been nominated for Best Human. So I do want to visit, again, a couple of the topics that we visited here in this narrative. So we talked about the early beginnings and the various black people, the nurses and the attendants who encouraged you and loved you to life, as you shared here a moment ago. But there's also another part of this narrative where you talk about the dealing with early experiences with childhood sexual abuse. I don't want to downplay that, and I would like to give you the microphone for a moment to share with us as much as you feel comfortable of what that experience and how that has affected you moving forward.
Well, it was maybe the downside to the way that I grew up, and I would say I guess I wouldn't even call it downside, but the challenge of growing up with such a serious disability was that there was so much social isolation. There was,
Okay.
I went into the hospital. I was never really the kind of person who had a lot of friends. I required some level of personal care, and so my social circle was pretty minimal. And so I had really, I kind of fell victim rather easily to a neighbor who paid a lot of attention to me. It's almost the textbook description now of how sexual abuse happens. Feeling like someone, myself, got groomed and essentially, really wanted a friend so much that I went with this person, this male who really kind of groomed me. And so for a period of a couple of years, I experienced rather extensive and severe sexual abuse. And it really did, it shaped a lot of things. It shaped my self-care. It shaped how I saw myself. It was very hard. I grew up in a home where I never really heard, my parents were wonderful, but they weren't affectionate. They weren't parents who said, "I love you." And this person did say, "I love you." And so I really was drawn to that. And anyway, it eventually ended. This person actually ended up moving away, and it ended. And there was a point where it actually came out. I was actually raised a Jehovah's Witness, and they kind of swept it under. And so any potential for healing in childhood didn't really happen. And so I really kind of lived with the impact of that for most of my middle school, high school years. And it really did impact me, and it really did, my grades suffered, my hygiene suffered, and I think the challenge being that there were a lot of people who just attributed all of those things to my disability. They all thought, oh, well, he's in high school now, so he's just struggling academically, or, he's got more expectations on him, so he's having a harder time taking a shower, et cetera, et cetera. And that was never the case. It was always dealing with, the body image issues and the abuse issues. And, so it became pretty dramatic and profound in my life, and it kind of led me into a cycle of self-abuse, for a while suicidal ideation, really a lot of self-destructive behaviors, kind of starting toward the end of high school into my early college years. I went through this really profoundly negative period, and interestingly enough, it was, and I know you can identify with this, it was really the arts that kind of helped pull me out. I was on the speech team in high school, and I started doing very emotion-driven speeches. I did a lot of drama. I did a lot of writing, and that was the things. Those were the things that really helped me start to survive and to, start to express myself, and eventually, it's. While the first couple people I told may not have done anything and may not have believed, eventually someone did, and I started getting the help that I needed. So, I started to find my way out of that.
Yeah. Well, it
was profound. I mean, it was a profound impact.
Well, that certainly seems to also be. Sort of some of the things where you start to find your voice, through the arts. You're starting to find out who you are, and being able to get that out, to express that, whether through writing or the speech team and that sort of thing. So I think that is powerful, and you've had a substantial.
When I was
yes.
Yeah, And that's also what led to the Tenderness Tour, which of course I'm sure we'll talk about, is kind of when my activism started. And that's really when I started to find the healing, was when I finally started to, reach out and try to find other people and use my voice, and actually try to encourage other people to use their voices.
Well, let's go to the Tenderness Tour right now.
Okay.
Let's go there. So go ahead and let's find our way from that conversation. You touched on it, and I'm like, well, that seems like a good place to go. I'm with you, man. Let's go.
We don't want to leave people in a down place. No, it's in 1989.
Okay.
I kind of bottomed out. I had kind of reached a point of really, I had actually gotten married, but my wife ended up taking her own life, and I had lost my feet, which happened right around then, 1988. And, literally, I was losing everything. I'd lost my home. I was living in my car. I was struggling. I tried to kill myself, and it didn't work. And so I thought, okay, and I was like, God, if you want me to be here, you're going to have to show me a reason, and you're going to have to show me how. So I came up with this idea, and I was going to travel around the state of Indiana in my wheelchair. And I was going to travel for 41 days, and I mapped it out, and it was like 1,086 miles. And that was going to be my plan. And I called it the Tenderness Tour because tenderness was what I hadn't really experienced and what I needed to find out if it existed in the world. And so I did. I wrote some press releases. Back then we still had typewriters. I wrote them out on my typewriter and sent them out to newspapers and radio stations. And I gathered down on Massachusetts Avenue. It was a fundraiser for Prevent Child Abuse Indiana, and I was gonna do it. And I'd never done it before. I was not an athlete. I physically, almost everybody would have said I could never have done it, but I was like, I'm going to try. So I gathered down there, and I headed off that first day, and I was really ambitious that first day. I was like, I'm going to wheel to Shelbyville my first day. And, of course, I didn't wheel to Shelbyville my first day because that was way too far. But I made it to Greenfield in my wheelchair.
Wow.
And I was greeted by the fire chief, who had seen me on the news, because all the news stations locally had come out, because it's a weird story. Some guy in a wheelchair is going to wheel around the state, and
so Richard, just for the sake of giving our listeners a perspective, so you started from Mass Ave. You didn't get to Shelbyville, but you did get to Greenfield, and Greenfield is how many miles?
Oh, about 30.
Okay.
Where I stopped in Greenfield was about 30.
That's yeah. Okay, go right ahead.
And I'd never done that before. So now I had done the mini marathon on crutches one time, but back when I had legs. But I was not an athlete, and it was pure emotional power. It was mental strength that I'm not sure I even knew I had. And I made it. And to be greeted by someone when I got there who said, we'd love for you to stay in the fire station overnight, because, I had like $20 in my pocket. I had a backpack on my wheelchair. Most places hadn't contacted me back because, of course, it's kind of a crazy story. So they didn't really believe it. And so when I started showing up, people were surprised, but they were also really, really open about it. And so, I got to Greenfield. I spent overnight in the fire station. I met with the mayor. I, got the newspaper. I got the radio station. It was a great experience. And then, of course, what happened the next day, I got back on the road and I made it to Shelbyville. So
there you go.
And I just kept doing it. And so I kept wheeling for 41 days alone in my wheelchair along the roads of Indiana, small highways mostly, sometimes side roads. And I just kept going. I went around the border of Indiana, and I zigzagged Indiana a couple of times. And basically, I went places that were interesting to me, and wasn't a whole lot of methodology to it because I was new at it. But I kept going. I kept going, and I kept stopping, and the word kept spreading, and people kept being open. And and I'm not going to say I didn't have any problems, because I had a couple of days where my body kind of gave up. There was one day where I crashed down a hill outside of, I believe it's Delphi, Indiana. It's called Mile Long Hill, and it's a mile long hill. And I lost my medical supplies, and I've got certain supplies that if I don't have, I'm not going to be around for a long time. So I was in trouble. I lost them. And we called an ambulance. They got me to an emergency room. Of course, going back to the idea of a rural hospital, they didn't have the supplies I needed. So they called a supply firm, and here it is, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. The guy from the supply firm brings them out in the middle of the night. Exactly what I needed.
Wow. That's incredible.
It was amazing. And I never got a bill from any of them. They all donated their time, and the hospital never sent me a bill. And it was an amazing, and I had that kind of thing again and again and again on the road. And so here I was, there's a big part of me that thought I was going to find out that people really did suck, quite honestly, because that's what I'd really experienced up to that point in my life. And honestly, I found out just the opposite.
That is incredible.
Time and time again.
It's amazing how God opens these doors, and and the people are there. The angels are there to greet you, and everything that you needed with your $20 in your pocket mysteriously was provided for. We're going to take a break right now. This is Bill Myers Inspires, and my guest today is the amazing Mr. Richard Probst. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talent, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, BillMyersInspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation.
We are here today with my guest, Mr. Richard Probst. This is Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers. We were just talking about activism and one of the things that Richard did at a low point in his life, not sure he could even do it, what he called the Tenderness Tour, where he got on his wheelchair and rode around the state of Indiana. So this started in 1989. I want to jump cut right now because I have this in this bio that he has wheeled over 6,000 miles since 1989 and has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for children's organizations worldwide through his award-winning Tenderness Tour. Richard, you are amazing, sir. Again, I have never gone 30 miles in my car in a wheelchair with challenges, man. So I want to get back to our theme today, which we were talking about, which was the statement that you made, I owe my life to black people. So you were talking about a low point in your life and, marriage, a wife that had committed suicide. Again, I don't want to, but you went through some things and bottomed out in your early adult life, we should say. And so I want to now set the story up because as we were talking about education and you had mentioned that you attended Martin University and Martin University, for those who do not know, in Indianapolis, Indiana, is I guess a black college. I mean, that's how I have always heard it or seen it referenced. And so, or black university, I guess it's Martin University. So, but you were stating that you were in this low point. Now I'm imagining it might have been relatively around this same window of time that you came across another gentleman, and you said you were, living out of your car, homeless, and all that. So please set this part of the story up because these are the two sort of benchmark stories I think that I attach to. So please set that up.
Oh, I absolutely, and actually it's perfect timing because I came back from that first Tenderness Tour, and I knew that I had to get my life together. I knew that there was hope, and I didn't know necessarily how to get my life together, but I needed to do it. I knew that I had hope, and I also knew that I had a life mission. The Tenderness Tour was going to continue in some way. And so I came back home, and I came back to Indy, and the first thing I did was to get into housing. So I got into housing, started to get some stability. At that time, it was Section 8 housing, and I found a safe home so that I could kind of get things together. And then I decided we're going to go to college. We're going to go. I tried a couple of times, and it didn't work out well for me. I was kind of good at it, but I really struggled. And so I looked at smaller schools and ended up hearing about Martin University. A friend of mine was going there, and I went over there and I talked to them, and I met, I believe it was actually on my first day, Father Boniface Hardin, who founded Martin University. And he, I believe in 1977, if I remember the year, he founded it. He is, if you don't know Father Hardin, he was a Catholic priest. He looked a lot like Frederick Douglass, and to the point that he would do, Frederick Douglass, oratory. He would appear as Frederick Douglass, and just an extraordinary man, very regal. Started Martin University, and he and I instantly connected. And because of my sexual abuse, I will say that most of the people in my life, most of my friends and supports have always been women. So it's always something special when I find a male and there's some bonding there. But Father Hardin and I instantly connected. And he was like, come here, we can help you. And I made the arrangements. Vocational rehabilitation was going to help me out since I was trying to go to work. So I was able to get some funding. And so I started with Martin University. And if you don't know Martin, it's this university at like 21st and Avondale Place on the east side of Indy. It's at the time was primarily in this old church and this old elementary school. And it was, at the time, 3 floors, no elevator. And they've since addressed that. Don't want to get them in trouble. They've since addressed that. But it was, so it was a challenging place to go, but Father Hardin was just the most amazing person I'd ever met. And so, I went there and I started my first semester, and the instructors really determined to figure out how I learned best. They felt like I hadn't been reached. They were like, hey, we've talked to you enough. We know you're intelligent. We know you're better than, these grades that you brought on your transcripts. And so anyway, they kind of committed to it. They kind of figured out how I learned. Father Hardin got everybody going to support me, to teach me the way I could learn best, and I started getting A's, which was really brand new to me. Had no idea. I mean, I always thought I had a lot of good qualities. Brains wasn't one of them, but I was getting A's. In fact, the first semester was straight A's. And anyway, Father Hardin and I we started connecting, and he started building me up, and he refused. There was a point where I almost gave up because it was becoming too hard. He wouldn't let me give up. He just would never give up on that. He would never give up on me. And I ended up graduating. They got me an internship at a hospital. Again, it was Winona Hospital, which is no longer open, but it was a private college or a private hospital at 32nd and Meridian. And it was so they got me an internship. I got some experience. I ended up graduating in 1994, got my degree, actually graduated with a 4.0.
Wow.
Who knew? Had no idea. I was a graduation speaker. And again, it was Father Hardin who he wouldn't give up on me. He didn't see the disability. He saw the ability, and he just figured out how to reach that and how I could live into that. It was the most amazing, and he continued to do that. He's passed away since, but he continued to do that. At one point, I graduated and I was employed the next day at the place where I had interned.
Wow. And
I worked there for 9 years and got laid off when they closed. It was an amazing experience. But Father Hardin was even there through that. I mean, he contacted me while I was laid off. And just one of the first true role models I had for healthy masculinity is what I would say.
Yes. And a black man.
And a black man.
He's a black man.
And a black man.
And I only share that because the idea of having to distinguish that, particularly from the standpoint that our listeners are not necessarily from Indianapolis. So I'm just needing to make sure that people understand the context here. And that is amazing. Again, him lifting you up, him walking with you, him not giving up on you, him encouraging you, someone who you didn't believe you had any academic prowess or skills whatsoever, and all of a sudden you tell me that you graduated with a 4.0 because he figured out how you learn, and he met you there. And see, I'm a former school teacher, and definitely understand the fact that every individual has their own way that they actually process information. Now, because they don't fit the mold over here, then a lot of times we just sort of toss them aside, when in fact, that could be absolute brilliance. It's the fact that we don't know enough as the teacher or as the adult in the room to figure it out. And so that's really pretty inspiring, intuitive, ingenious, that he understood all of that and knew that there was more to you than you knew yourself. And he reached in there and he companioned you right through that and lifted you up to a 4.0 and success. So that's an amazing thing. So at this point, we are going to take our last little pause here, And you are listening to Bill Myers Inspires right here on the Inspired Choices Network. And my guest today is, again, the amazing Richard Probst. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talent, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, BillMyersInspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation.
We're back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and my guest today is Mr. Richard Probst, and the title of our show today is I Owe My Life to Black People, and we were just talking about one of the major figures in his life, which is Father Boniface Hardin of Martin University, and what a very powerful man Father Hardin was and is as he continues to live through you. His legacy is alive and well. You are a product of his legacy, and so we celebrate him through you at this point. So again, it is an honor to have you here. Now, in the midst of all of this, again, I must get back to our topic here and what we've been discussing since I launched the show, which I want to talk about other things, but I have the racial divide has been the thing that has I've had to focus in on, because that feels much more immediate to me and urgent that we have these conversations. So as you have shared, I owe my life to Black people, and your experience, you still live in community with Black people in your neighborhood, and I mean, in a Black community. And so that is something that you have a perspective on. These are the people who saved your life. These are the people who walked with you academically. These are the people who got you, who supported you, lifted you up. So Richard, the question I have to you is, where do we go, and what is your observation currently of the Black Lives Matter movement and the racial unrest that we are experiencing right now? I would like to hear your perspective from your point of view and your experience, what your thoughts are about that.
I've thought, it's so, anyway, it's so hard. I'm somebody, as you have, as you've said, I mean, I have felt accepted and nurtured and guided and loved by the Black community here in Indy my whole life. From day one, I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood. As you noted, I went to Martin University. I live in a neighborhood now that is probably 90% Black. I have always been loved, and I've never had a single moment where I looked at a black man and I thought, and I perceived threat, or I perceived anything negative, or there's not that obvious bias, I guess you would say, that I think is so incredibly prevalent in our society. When you look at things like, police brutality and, violence, and that there's more violence against black men, and the stats, they prove that. That's not even something that can be argued. I mean, it's a fact. It's true. And there have been studies done on bias, and we know that it's out there, and we know, even as someone, you're an entertainer, how the media can portray, and it's tragic, and it's weird, and I don't have a frame of reference for it. And it's something that I'm glad I don't have a frame of reference for it. I don't understand it. I don't understand having that fear or that anxiety or that bias. And not to say that I'm not human, but I just literally from day one, I have valued diversity. I have the black community in Indianapolis is, literally, I think one of the strongest reasons I'm about to turn 55. I believe that with every fiber of my being. From the nurses and the doctors to the nurses' aides who, took care of me, took care of my body, to the professors, to the fellow students. Martin University is probably 90 to 95% black students.
Right.
These men and women loved me. Yeah. And they believed in me on a level. And so it pains me more than I can even express to think that they don't experience that in our society.
Right.
See, I really do have a point. I was going to get to it eventually.
No, you're there. and
that's the thing. And I want to build I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
It drives me nuts. I want to build a community that does that. I want my Indianapolis, and I love Indianapolis. I've lived here my whole life. I love Indianapolis, but I want to build an Indianapolis that welcomes and nurtures and provides opportunities for the black community. And so, when
you have it, and that is evident in your walk, your bio, your choices. You are an inspiration to many, and I want to sort of, I got to grab the reins now, but I do want to share this. What you are saying leads me to my quote of the day, which is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it is, an individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. That's what you're saying, Richard. That's what you're saying.
Yep.
And to hear you grappling with words, trying to put that, how do you express gratitude for your life? So that is an amazing story. So we're on our way out of here right now, but I want to do this right now. And it is October the 1st, and it is happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Richard, happy birthday to you. That's how I want to end this show today. Richard Probst, you are an amazing individual, and I love you, and I wish you all the best. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending your afternoon right here with us at Bill Myers Inspires. Remember, we're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. on the Inspired Choices Network. Remember to take time this week to take a breath and look within yourself and figure out how you can make a positive difference in this world. Spread the word, and we'll see you here